Hi, I'm Dave. This is Bruce and Leah and Izzy. You're watching Bark and Build,
where I embark on a journey to advance from amateur woodworking level to somewhat competent. Join me and the doggos, Izzy, Leah, and Bruce, as we complete various projects. Go on adventurous walks, and learn from various successes or mistakes along the way, whether at the workbench or on the trail. It's great to have you with us. Alright, welcome to the very first episode of the Bark and Build YouTube channel. I'm so excited to have you here today. Heck, I am excited to be here right now. This has been a dream of mine for a very long time. And what you are witnessing in this episode is me shooting for the stars. Thank you so much for joining us. I am truly blessed to be able to stand here and talk to you. And I've been blessed with tools, through to material, through to hardware, through to this opportunity and the courage to throw myself out there. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope you enjoy this channel, and welcome. To kick us off in this pilot of Bark and Build, we are going to repurpose some wood and make a buddy of mine a fish tank display. Now, the dude's name is Alistair, and I think you guys can agree that he has done an amazing job to develop his little ecosystem. Now, Alistair reached out with a very rough design. Basically, his requirements were keep the fish in the fish tank, keep the fish tank in the air. Yeah. So I had a lot of opportunity to get creative, and given that we were going to throw this on YouTube and I was going to start my dream, I decided to try and use a few new techniques. Now, we always start with designs, right? Threw a few designs in the air, and the original agreement between Alistair and myself was pallet wood, just something practical and pretty. But while doing it, an idea came to me of repurposing cabinets from a neighbor. And then the design came up that we are looking at now. So we're going to repurpose these doors. And here in the video you're looking at right now, you can see me talking and telling you a very long story about the doors. I hadn't really started working on them yet, so I really like them there and I really like talking about them. The idea was simple. Use the long door as two side panels, cut the short door in half to become two doors. Quick and easy, right? Well, I'm an amateur and I grossly underestimated this project. So jumping in, we'll need to start with the frame. And as with most of my projects, we start by sourcing materials. For the frame itself, we will be using the 4 stringers from this pallet. And to those unsure, these are stringers and these are deck boards. For a clear idea, this is what ChatGPT gave me. To free the stringers, you'll need some gloves, a crowbar, or 2, a hammer, and a mallet. And let's just take a moment. Okay, so back to busting. It's important to be as thorough as you can to get the nails out of the wood you intend to use. On that note, given that my dogs are around while I work, I take the time to ensure that I place planks that still have nails in them facing down, and then I push those nails into the grass. That way, the dogs can wander freely while I go crazy. A little something like this. And yeah, important plank. Okay, so once the stringers are free and have no nails, we can plane them. I'm busy with a few projects at the same time, and I do not own an industrial planer. So I prepped all the wood for the next few videos, loaded them onto my bakkie, and took them to a friend to plane them down. This is for a few reasons. However, for this specific project, the planer was to be used to clean all the sides of the decking planks as well as the stringers, and to get the stringers to be 70 millimeters thick exactly. This took me about 7 hours. Okay, so what you see me doing now is setting up a planar jig on my router table. So it turns out there were one or two stringers that still had an unstraight edge. Now, what's supposed to follow from here is I take this flat edge and run it on the table saw and strip these planks down the middle. However, I lost that footage. So instead, okay, so that was wild and messy. Anyways, we have our 33 by 33 long strips. Now, unfortunately, some of them are a bit curvaceous. They were pallet wood slats, but good news is we are going to cut them down. So if you look deeper into our design and aim for the bones, you'll see a frame measuring 80 centimeters by 55 centimeters by 40 centimeters, right? And before we cut them down, we need to think about the joints for the frame. Remember, this thing needs to be able to hold a fish tank filled with water and filled with sand, which is roughly 90 kilograms. I decided to go with a double miter joint for the corners. Anyways, to obtain the double miter joint we need to cut two 45-degree angles on the ends of every plank in the frame. So to plan for this, as we cut our strips into the right length, we measure, then mark, then cut. And the way it works is like so. On the flat plane, the two 45-degree cuts form a 90-degree angle when put together. Then in the z-axis, or the third dimension, the third plank will slot into the 45-degree groove, forming three 90-degree angles in 3 dimensions. Moving on, we can't exactly put the frame together yet because of the nature of the panels on either side. So in preparation for those, we're going to cut some slots into the legs of the frames. And note to self, plan this better next time, otherwise you end up making poop. Okay, now the frame is about as ready as it can be, and logically, I should now start showing you the panel preparation, but I don't want to. Those puppies made this project go on for about an extra 2 weeks and caused me so much grief. So instead, I'm going to leave those for last and do the tabletop next. So to start the tabletop, again we start with sourcing, which you guys have technically already seen. While busting the pallets and other repurposed planks for the videos to come, I accumulated multiple pallet planks that were pretty much useless. They only had about 3 centimeters width of plank on them that could be used practically. And instead of throwing them out, I decided to use those viable 3 centimeter sections for something constructive. Our tabletop has a simple design. It's going to be 3 centimeters thick, 40 centimeters wide, and 55 centimeters long. And we're going to achieve this design by gluing a bunch of 3 centimeter thick planks together to get the 40 centimeter width we're after. Busting these pellets into strips is actually fairly easy. We're just going to chuck them on the table saw. And while I'm cutting these, I had a thought. Imagine you are this plank, right? Started off as a beautiful tree, and then as life started lifing, you ended up beat down, busted up, and were displayed on some amateur's first YouTube video as scrap being repurposed. I'm pretty sure Mr. Plank over here is having a rough time. And to repurpose this plank that I had neglected to throw away, I'm cutting large amounts of it off, and I'm about to do a whole lot more in the realm of uncomfortable. Well, for the plank. And hold that thought. Alrighty. So we have got our 30 mil strips, thank goodness. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut them in half. Well, technically, look, the tabletop is going to be 55 centimeters wide, but I'm going to go and cut them 56 centimeters or 560 mils. I don't know what that is in American. And then we're going to glue it all together. So okay. After we have all the strips cut to length, we need to glue them up. This is the first time I've built a tabletop out of multiple strips, so unsurprisingly, I misjudged the effect of clamps when I tried applying pressure. Initially, I put the clamps at the bottom, and when I applied pressure, the tabletop started arching right over here. And to fix this, I used a simple mechanic solution. I flipped the clamps around, applied a cross beam, and bam, you have a flat surface.
The next day.
Okay. So, young lady, what do you want to do for a living? Ah! I wonder what that sounded like. Okay, down, down, down. So this is what our tabletop looks like right now. Nice and rough edges. I'll show you guys from the side there. Definitely not even. Even though it was all planed and cut down to the same size, obviously when I glued it, it did slip up a little bit, even though we had that beam across here. So I'm going to plane about a mil off, or 2 mils off on the top, and 2 mils on the bottom. And let's see how that looks. As much as I'd love to throw this thing through the planer you saw me use earlier, I do have an electrical hand planer. And these puppies do love to go off on their own. So clamping a piece of straight wood to direct it worked out pretty well. Again, this is a first for me. Now that we have a flat surface, we can sand the top down. To do this, I'm using an angle grinder with a flappy disc fitting. I'm going 80 grit for now, and we'll go up to 100 grit later on. Now, to finish the top off, I'm just going to add a rounded chamfer using my router table. And back to Mr. Plank over here. He's just been through some serious downscaling, resizing, and a whole bunch of friction. And yet, he's actually starting to look like something that is capable of more. So, the reason I'm telling you guys this here is because I think you're too important to miss the connection. You see, maybe you've been going through a whole lot of rough stuff. Maybe you just feel tired. And the good news is God doesn't want to throw you away either. In fact, through his master plan in Jesus Christ, he devised a way to create the best possible outcome for you. The best scenario where you get the best out. If you're watching this video and you're one of those people that would like to be more or do more than your life decisions has limited you to, I strongly suggest just ask God. He's incredibly creative at restoring all of us back to the incredible creation he intended us to be. Okay, so back to the fishy project. Now that we have the bones for a frame and a top, we need to get started on the base. So this is what I'm thinking. And to build this, I'm going for some more scrap. I found this plank and this plank on a mountain of scrap that was advertised on Facebook as free wood. They were both planed to the same thickness, and I was going crazy with all that wood. I then cut them to the same length and width as the base. To join these, we'll be going for a single miter joint. As you can guess, that's like one from the above, but with 145-degree cut. I then use my jigsaw to cut the decorative leg looking thing out, and repeat that for all pieces of the base. And then we pop over to the router table once again and add a soft rounded bevel or a chamfer to the decorative part, some quick sanding, and we can start assembling the base, unlike the frame. So let's do that. I start by gluing and clamping. Now, the geometry behind clamping 45-degree angles is extremely tricky. You try clamp along the vertical and then the horizontal pops out, and vice versa. But it's very difficult to show this on camera, so here's a quickie on what went down. And that was supposed to be it, but I was worried about the strength of the glue joint, so I decided to add 16mm dowels through the joints at a inverted 45-degree angle to add strength and support. And now time for the labor part, the panels. To start, we obviously need to remove the paint. So I bought a 500 milliliter of paint stripper, thinking it would be more than enough. This was my first time using the stripper. Applying the stuff is super satisfying and incredible to watch. We start by cleaning the surface, The trick is to be super generous in application. There seems to be a directly proportional relationship between the two, which, saying out loud now, feels like logic. But when you're thinking of price per 100 milliliter, you're thinking, let's test those boundaries. Anyways, needless to say, after using the whole tin on these two mere doors, the paint was far from gone. I then sanded the rest off of the flat surfaces using the grinder and flappy disc system once again. That was pretty easy, though still time consuming. Getting the paint off of the grooves, on the other hand, was nuts. It took me 2 weeks. In hindsight, I should have sanded the flat surfaces from the beginning and then used the stripper in the harder to sand areas, but I honestly thought 500 milliliters would be more than enough for both. Anyways, I finally came right by using an angle grinder with a wire brush, some chisels, unfortunately I lost that footage, some sandpaper, and finally I lost it and just painted the white spots brown. So after 10 days of after work labor, sometimes during work labor, on these cabinet doors, and still not being able to completely get the paint off, I decided to try and paint the grooves brown, sand it slightly, and see what happens. The result was some kind of weathered look. I don't know, maybe it's just the relief of something better than the spots of white, but I personally like it. What do you guys think? Did I mess this whole thing up with the brown paint shortcut? Full disclosure, any footage that follows this will have paint in those grooves. Because those things took so long to finish, I finished the rest of the build while trying to chip that paint out and get that weathered look. So I unfortunately fell for one of the oldest tricks in the book, and that is poor planning. As thorough as I thought I was by designing the whole thing, I forgot to take into account the measurements of the actual pantry door. And instead of thinking I could cut it perfectly in half and just use each half, I now realize I should have measured the thing in the first place. Stupid mistake. I'm sure you can all agree. But anyway, so what I'm gonna have to do is cut it slightly shorter. And what that now means is the bottom portion of the design, or of the whole indent that I was hoping to keep, is lost. So I'm still gonna try go ahead and see it, because this has to be ready in 2 days. But yeah, let's see how it goes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my circular saw with the jig I've set up over here to cut off each section. And I've set up this jig so that it's at the edge of the sled that is on the table saw, and then we can just push it through. All right, well, let's get started. Cutting the length works well with the circular saw, but if you haven't guessed yet, my first love is the table saw, which is what we use for the width of each panel. To get the slots to fit into the frame slits, we use a vernier to set the blade 5 millimeters up and 7 millimeters away from the fence. And away we go. And away again. And again. Okay, you guys get the idea. We go in all four sides. Oh, just listen to what's coming. Satisfying, right? Well, anyways, after a few passes on the table saw, there are quite a few little pieces that are not level. So we use the chisel to get all of those out, and well, the chisel and some patience, of course. And now we can start assembling the cabinet itself. We'll start that process off by gluing each panel to its select frame. I decided to add dowels along each side to further minimize the chance of the edges slipping along while clamping. Sadly, the stringers we used had a nice chip that had broken out while we were busting the pallets, and this is what the chip looks like now. So we're going to try our first ever patch job. I cut a few grooves before the clamping was done so that chiseling the patch dimensions would be easier. Once chiseling is finished, it's as simple as applying the patch and some glue and a clamp. Moving on, here's a clip of before and after the panels had been sanded. And without sounding repetitive, this is kind of how I built the bottom. Okay, let's move on to the cabinet glue up. Gluing a big box is one thing, but with double miter joints it feels like trying to eat soup with a fork. The geometry behind the stabilization of a double miter joint had me baffled. Clamping along the length pushes the supports along the width, upwards, and vice versa. Additionally, as soon as you apply the glue it becomes a race, and doing this glue up in the sun was probably not my best moment. But I do think that I managed to get it in the end, and this is what it looks like once you've got absolutely every angle covered that you can with a limited clamp supply.
The next day.
Okay, so now that the glue is dried, we can start with the middle shelf. And I was about to go through the motions of explaining what that is, but Leah over here reminded me of something. If you're still watching, there's a chance you're actually enjoying this video. Remember, it's the first on this channel, and I would really love to make some more. Please consider subscribing, and perhaps even smashing the like button. Subscriptions help me monetize my channel, and pressing the like button tells YouTube to suggest this video to others, thus helping me more. Okay, so the shelf was just cut to size, maybe with a few extra notches to help with the design of the panels. Anyways, to close the back, I'm simply cutting a board out of some melamine I had lying around. And Alistair had mentioned in passing that he was a fan of the torched wood look. So finally, it is time for the assembly. We start by screwing in the tabletop. Next up is some guide holes for the base. Some screws. Some hardware for the doors and some chiseling for the hinges on the doors themselves. Some finish, and at long last.
So that's looking flipping way. Yeah. Very, very, very nice.
Extremely good quality, to say the very least. Especially considering we pulled most of this wood out of a borderline scrapyard.
Borderline?
Yeah, there's been a lot of effort to get it to where it is at the moment.
Okay.
I am very, very, very stoked with it. I really like the fact that we did use those side doors with the pattern paneling for the side panels as well as the front. Yeah, otherwise, all in all, I'm super stoked. I'm going to have to now get a couple of fish that match the color tones, maybe a couple more orange-based fish in there.